Hey everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of Finding Peaks. Your host, yours truly, Chris Burns, President and CEO of Peaks Recovery Centers. So grateful to be here today, and even more grateful to be joined by my brother, business partner, and colleague, Brandon Burns. So grateful to have you on the show today, Brandon, and welcome back.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. And to all the viewers out there, I think we have 870,000 followers at this point. So for all of those of you who've missed me in my episodes, it's a wonderful opportunity not only to be back at Peaks, but to be back in front of the viewers talking more about our industry and leadership, behavioral health care, and so forth. So thanks for having me back, Chris.
Absolutely. Really excited to get into this episode, but I wanted to start with kind of a personal tone and lean into this a bit. Back in 2020, or the end of 2019, I was walking through a season of life that really required me to get some support for my mental health. I had gone through and worked in the industry for nearly 10 years. We had done a lot, and something that I hadn't done in that process was find it necessary to take great, not good, but great care of myself. And you afforded me this opportunity back in 2020, having been the CEO, and you allowed me to go have this time to really take great care of myself. And I'm able to come back today and let the viewers know, and you, like, I'm back better than ever, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And the opportunity that you had last summer, we were going through a lot as a company culture. The industry was shifting. We got thrown a tremendous amount of curveballs. We had some grief that we walked through. And so I know that it was intense and it felt very disconnected, but you had this opportunity as well to take a little break, to zoom out a little bit, to be where your feet are. And it's been my experience since bringing you back into the organization that you experience a tremendous amount of growth, not just personally, but professionally. And I just wanted to allow the viewers to gain a little bit of insight into that process that you walked through and what you gained from that and what you're bringing back to Peaks Rebound Tour 2024.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much, Chris, and personally just filled with gratitude to be in this chair today and to be where we are at Peaks Recovery Centers, given all of that we've gone through as the challenges. You know, to the viewers out there who remember my episodes, and certainly to, be honest and transparent about it as, sort of a process, just a little bit of a backfill on a storyline. When Chris stepped aside and allowed me to become the CEO and highlight me for that role, we had at that time only success at Peaks Recovery Centers as far as a business, driven model is going. And I was able to ride a really important wave out of COVID, recreation of services, getting us away from some of the challenges that we experienced in the early settings of COVID. And it's really, when I reflect on it as a period, it's amazing to ride things up from a business sense of things in behavioral health care, any industry or otherwise. It's one thing to be met with extraordinary challenges that you didn't see coming in this regard. And so we won't speak to the administrative challenges that we experienced, but January 17th of 2023 is sort of a day that will live in infamy with me as far as receiving an administrative problem that I didn't know how to handle. I didn't know how to handle it emotionally. I didn't know how to go to a team where I've only had successes with and say we have challenges and this is what we need to do. In honesty, I just didn't know how to show up as a leader in that moment. And that's a challenging recognition going through something that was so valuable at the time, to be the CEO of an organization and to be its sort of visionary for that time period, to hit such a speed bump and a curveball in the road. That completely dejected me from not only the path we were on, but the experience of leadership and what do I do now? And for the viewers out there, I can only describe the process and experience of dejection as sort of floundering, not having confidence, not knowing how to take the next steps, and only knowing how to point at a problem rather than create solutions out of it. And I think you, other leaders in the organization at the time, saw a distressed leader in that regard. And out of that, admittedly, upon reflection, and it's not just to scratch backs here, like, I needed to take a step away and a step away from. I was not in a position to lead and guide in the way that I thought I could throughout that time period. And so taking 10 months away from something, you have the CEO title now, I have an executive director title. I think that's one experience that was, really challenging. To feel like in a resume way, I'm taking a step back. And what I'm sharing with the viewers out there is like the emotional response of like anger and frustration and moving through processes outside of Peaks. But the gifts it gave me was internal of what was my responsibility in this. I wish I could have taken that administrative burden away from the company, just taken that administrative charge and said, this is what we are doing in confidence. I got everybody's back, and this is how we're going to carry this out. And it's through the process of stepping back, going on my runs, somatic experiences, and returning back to the fold that I had a lot of responsibility in that moment. And I did let the organization down, and I did, from a leadership standpoint, not have the emotional, intellectual, and sort of spiritual capacity to move the company through that challenging time. And I think it's important from that standpoint to reflect on the fact, ultimately, that we can take these moments and only move into emotional frustration and anger and whatever, and things were taken from me, or, as I was able to do in my process through my experiences, take a step back, hone in on my responsibility, find a path to show up better in the future, and get right-sized with my value system so that in the future, if I'm in a position, executive director, CEO, or otherwise, that I can meet those challenges in real time and meet it with a bigger heart and open mind and have the emotional capacity to be still in those moments.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you not just sharing that with me, but with the viewers. I think it's transparent, it's authentic, and it's clear. And I know there had been some rumblings in community on like what had happened, and so I just wanted to start off the show with really clearing that up for the viewers, is that the opportunity we have today because of what we've walked through over the last 10 years as business partners is, and I've heard it this morning, I've heard the slingshot analogy, but this morning it was an arrow Corinne was telling me about. And that's what I liken your experience over that 10 months to be. As much as it felt like this big step back, you were really anchoring into a position that you had never been, so you could go to a spot that was foreign. And we're experiencing that today as a company culture, and just appreciate, again, your authenticity and transparency for the viewers.
Yeah, and I just want to, in addition to that, honor, like, fear is such an easy place to operate from because it's soothing in a way to state, I know my truth, and it's indifferent to the reality that's that I'm being faced with. But for the viewers out there, as somebody who sort of transcended that fear through philosophy that I've shared in the past and I love, and through that sort of stoic lens, my attitude now in my emotional state is very much of a Marcus Aurelius tone, that the impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. And we are to be a rock in the sea of dysfunction in that regard as leaders within organizational sets. So when challenging things happen, people can look to us in confidence that we know the path and can be still in those moments. And so stillness is really the principle I've arrived at, the trade-off of fear into stillness. And now the things that are happening are just things we have to move through. And there's no reason to be in fear about it because there is another side to it.
Yeah, it's so clear to me, and huge to your point, is like presence affords us so much, but what informs presence, right? Mental health, opportunities to be where I'm at, being seen, valued, and heard in community, a lot of the stuff that you've expressed that you walked through over the last 10 months. It was extraordinarily difficult for us to come to that decision last summer because, as I've let all the viewers know, I mean, Brandon Burns is not satiated with the research, the insight, the education. He continually educates himself. So he's our only industry expert, and so it was really difficult to draw that arrow back and see Brandon go. And having said that, we are so grateful to have him back. We're pointed in just a really, really cool direction that's sustainable and fruitful and intended for the future, and we're really excited to have him back and really carry out this mission and this vision that you created with the team in the first place. So again, just really passionate about the opportunity we have in front of us. What are some of the things that you saw? Because a lot changes in this field, really on a day-to-day basis, a monthly basis, but certainly over a year. What are some of the shifts you've seen? Because something that you did, even though you took time away, was you stayed abreast to industry information, new things that were coming up, law changes, behavioral health administration. You were attuned to all of that throughout the process. So what are some of the changes that the viewers can be expecting and to be looking out for as they're trying to find a great program for their loved one?
Yeah, being on the outside, kind of looking in and not knowing exactly what the future would hold for me in that regard, it led to opportunities to interview with other companies and programs. It led for opportunities for connection, the power of LinkedIn at the end of the day to negotiate with people and create, professional relationships. And I think overall as an industry, the industry faces a lot of the same challenges when I left it. Those challenges, I think, is the saturation of services in certain areas. That applies pressure to how we hire individuals, professionals within the community, and so forth. And I think these are some of the great challenges and pitfalls of the future, that if this epidemic continues to rise in the background, we are falling short of staff in that regard. So maybe one thing the viewers can be mindful of in the future, just as they look for, a valuable program moving forward, is licensure opportunities, group sizes within state standards, and a variety of these more what feels right professionally, things that should exist within companies like this to deliver the best care possible, ensuring individual sessions and follow-up, complete utilization reviews to ensure that your loved one's getting care in programming is being maximized in that regard. But we are running into headwinds from a staffing standpoint as an industry, and I think that's something mindful for people to be of when they call admissions team. Your website looks beautiful, but can you actually deliver this care in that way? I think, as we spoke about in the past from these episodes, the Natural Medicine Health Act has afforded the psychedelic opportunities through mushrooms and future opportunities through MDMA and so forth, with these mushrooms being the first sort of front lines of the psychedelic interventions. I think we are getting a little over our ski tips here in the state of Colorado. And the thing that I've referred to the world as in the professional lens is that I've seen a lot of clinicians turn shaman overnight. And I'm seeing really an inappropriate, I want to call it at some level, clinical intervention of what we call heroic doses of psychedelics being given to participants. And I just think that's not the direction this was intended to go in. And so we're sort of still in that unregulated sort of Wild West space. My hope is that by 2025, when healing center licensures actually come out, we can get more right-sized as a state and a world around psychedelic treatment and move away from heroic doses into what is more clinically efficacious. Because really anything, as we've talked about, over 2 grams is probably not clinically efficacious. So I think that's one thing for the viewers to be thinking about as we move into healing centers. What does it mean to do a heroic dose? And why are we doing that at all in that regard? And then I would say, kind of the tail end to this, I think we still have to get our trauma narratives right as an industry. And this will be the final note I'll put on it. Hear me clearly, viewers out there with PTSD diagnosis and individuals who come from traumatic backgrounds. We are right-sized to talk about our trauma and to live in that reality. At the same time, I think the narrative has gotten away from something that has happened to us in the past, a traumatic event, as the thing that needs excavating versus my response, maladaptively speaking, to the event and my behavior that's taking to place. That's where trauma lies, is in the now and in the behavior, not in the past moment in that regard. And I think the industry could do a better job at relating this to individuals. Post-traumatic stress disorder means the stress is still happening in front of the past event, right? So the language matters here. And I think if we hone in on that a little bit better, we can be better informed trauma centers at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. It's very good Mormate of you. And I love that. Back to your initial point, I think it's important, and you brought up a great point for the viewers, but what's happening in our industry as payer sources are beginning to crunch, what programs are doing is they have amazing websites and all of this stuff, but they're maximizing group sizes over and above what is the parameter for the state regulations. And so one of the questions we really want to encourage people to ask, and in addition to a multitude of questions when you're calling these places, like how many group sizes, what does individuals look like? Just get really curious with it, because a lot of providers, especially in network, are moving to this more robust group size to make sense of the lower payments. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that's something, even as we're going into a full in-network provider, we are very integrous with, is ensuring that that group size doesn't go over 12, because naturally I'm not going to be able to heal in a group setting or have the connectivity I need and the insight offered if it's 25 people. And again, it's not safe. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up for the viewers. I think it's important to move into kind of one of our core values with that is like we're disrupting the industry through quality of care differently than when we came up with that core value probably 3-4 years ago. I know it meant something then, and I think it means something quite a bit different today. How do we begin to inform that and not spin our wheels and waste time, be very intentional with disrupting the industry. How do we do that today?
I think we live in this world, unfortunately, where the patient wants to say, Peaks Recovery Center is letting me down. And we want to say, no, the insurance company and reimbursements are letting us down. And then the patient calls the insurance company and says, no, it's Peaks. And we get into this finger-pointing game as an industry at the end of the day. And I think that's disruptive because all three of these prongs are really needed at the end of the day to drive a successful behavioral health care system. So for me, I think quality of care is a calling to the behavioral health industry to stop acting outside of healthcare, to stop creating programmatic features that are based in how we got well at the end of the day, to stop driving psychedelic interventions that worked for us but might not work for the individual in front of us, and to accept the fact that these are time-limited interventions. You know, we've talked about it on these past episodes, but just to recapitulate it today, the 30-day paradigm came out of a state law in the Northeast that said individuals who are suffering from alcoholism in the 70s need more time than 6 days in treatment. It's obvious to us that they need more time in treatment. But the challenge is when we say something like, we'll give you 90 days of care, is that right size for the individual? Are they in care for too long? Do they need to be in residential programming? Do they need to be in PHP or IOP? And these are some of the navigating features of our industry that continues to strain something from an outcome basis. We work with Vista Research. Vista Research continues to highlight since 1993, the outcomes and the national averages have not changed above 36% as an industry standard. And I think that strain and delay in outcomes is not because we aren't interested in evidence-based practices, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, these types of interventions. I think it's because we continue to place our own philosophies as individuals in recovery, whether from mental health or substance use disorders, in front of patient care to say, I did it this way, so you're going to succeed doing this way. But what we've learned is that way works 36% of the time, and 64% of people need multiple, if not tens of dozens of treatment episodes, to get well in the process. And so some way we have to work together within the model that we are in as a healthcare system, use variable length of stay as an actual fundamental feature of this, and get right-sized with what we can work on within a residential treatment model. What I mean by that is probably not deep excavating of traumatic events, but stabilization of emotions, relationships, those types of things. And then better utilize these buckets of care that we call ambulatory, PHP, and IOP more usefully. Once the individual is stabilized, now we can work on sort of more of these intensives without exacerbating the original symptomology that brought them into care.
Yeah. No, I think that's really huge, and it's clear to me. It almost feels like individualized treatment for the first time ever.
Yeah.
It's like everybody said we're going to do these things, but a lot of times we're coming in, we're like, everybody does grief and loss, everybody does identity and purpose, everybody does relationship. Well, what if, just what if the individual who's coming in needs skill building? What if they need a community wrapped around them? What if we met everybody as an individual and approached their treatment in that way? I know we've been using, it's a hot kind of coin topic words, these days, individualized care. But really what happens is you come in and you do the program that they're telling you to do. So I love this opportunity because it's an opportunity to get a little bit more curious and a little bit more clear with the individual to say, hey, we don't need to go down into the lion's den if we don't need to. We can focus in on what the trauma is causing. It's not about the trauma, it's what happens inside of us and outside of us as a result of that trauma. So I really love this new way is to say, you're not going to come in, we're going to put a box over your head and say, you're doing this thing. Really begin to meet people where they're at. And that's a cutting edge way, I think, to disrupt the industry through quality of care.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, as you know about me, I love tangents in the past few years, so I don't mean to be tangential about this in any way, but I think when you think about the delivery of care and access to care in behavioral health care, the vast majority of clinical services, better stated, the vast majority of clinical interventions are received in a group atmosphere. So go around the group and you have individuals suffering from suicidal ideation, low ADLs, and maybe psychotic features, in relationship to their medications. Go through the group and you might have somebody who just has a significant opioid use disorder or a polysubstance disorder. Go around the room and you might have somebody with a major depressive disorder with some use, but not, not substance use disorder related in that regard. So just taking these 3 individuals that I've described and put them in a room, rhetorically, I'm going to ask the viewers, how does a single programmatic approach lower the symptomology and advance recovery for each individual within that setting? Never mind, in the state of Colorado, the Behavioral Health Administration, the group size is not greater than 12. So just put 12 people inside that group at the end of the day. How does a programmatic intervention speak to the symptomology of each individual? It's rhetorical because it is nearly impossible when we ask it in that framework. So from a group perspective, we need to be more creative in our approaches to that and more honest with family systems about the maximum possibility of delivering interventions in time-limited services at the end of the day. I believe I had a follow-up point to the group setting at the end of the day, but maybe I can just rest it there and it'll come up here in the future.
But I love that too, because it really points to this piece of a greater process, right? And you pointed to length of stay and not excluding these really valuable intensives that have been around for a while that we know we can extrapolate really good information from and growth. It's just doing them at the right time and at the right size, which is something we haven't really looked at in this industry. Is this person ready to receive this service? Is it going to exacerbate symptoms? Fine. Then we're not doing it. And so I think it paints a very clear picture for people coming into care that we are potentially moving into something at Peaks Recovery that can treat each person as an individual and begin to back up what we talk about a lot, which is treating suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And what if family systems knew the correct language at the end of the day for how this is working? It's not a program. It's called levels of care. It's residential, PHP, IOP, outpatient. That's how it works. What is it based in? It's based in ASAM criteria. What do those standards mean? What does the Behavioral Health Administration here in Colorado mean? All of these external bodies are applying pressure to these models at the end of the day. And so when I think about that original sort of cycle between provider, managed care systems, and patients at the end of the day, all of these things are applying at one time. And so removing the hyperbolic language as an opportunity and informing family systems how this actually works, I think would be actually very healing for the family system coming in to know why Johnny just got stepped down to this thing called PHP when you said it could be for 30 days at the same time, because that's the expectation of the managed care systems. And I think it would provide a lot more insights to the individual who's moving through care about what I need to be working on and to not sort of get comfortable about this position that I'm in because somebody told me I was guaranteed, these time frames. And I guess the last thing I'll add to it, one of the things that strikes me kind of as absurd in our industry from a quality standpoint right now is like we know these cell phone devices, we know social media at the end of the day is messing with our brains. There's not a person you can walk to in this world right now, I think, that's paying any attention to this, that this isn't causing a lot of harm, especially to adolescents, to adults from our attention and consumption standpoint. So an ad that says something like, come into programming, get your cell phone here today. One, yeah, cell phones matter in this world, like we need them. At another point, like, these are behavioral health disorders, and at the strictest level, these things are messing with that disorder at the end of the day and exacerbating the issue. So I want to be curious with the industry why cell phones at the end of the day are so important when we know it's causing a lot of these issues at the end of the day for the individual that's suffering, and to just be mindful that as a family system. Is it more important to have your cell phone in treatment, or is it more important to get down to the disorder and get into solutions and move into recovery? And so it's not that cell phones are bad in treatment. It's if there's an ad about that, we should probably put our spidey senses on and go, maybe this isn't where I want my loved one to go.
Yeah, I think I was reading something the other day in regards to cell phones with respect to its ability to detract from our mental health, increase anxiety, exacerbate depression, because there's this thing that we don't get a lot in our culture anymore that we used to have as kids called boredom.
Yeah.
And this boredom thing, it actually fosters a lot. Thought, deep thinking, insight,
presence.
empathy. So these things come up, and then at worst case, you go outside.
Yeah.
And so we're missing a lot of that. And I'm grateful that you brought that up because there's a tremendous amount of information on and how this detracts from our mental health, yet we see programs putting them on their website and saying, you can have these, come on in. So something to be wary of and mindful of the program structure when you're going in. You know, are they there to make a buck? Are they there to find healing for the individual? Because the power of no is really powerful, you know?
Yeah. And I would imagine for a lot of people coming in, and we can just put a pin in it to continue the episode forward for the car drives home, but an individual coming into treatment that's demanding their cell phone is probably likely exceeding 6 hours of screen time on their phone at the end of the day. I mean, when we think about that from a day standpoint, that's, in my quick math there, I think that's 25% of our day staring at a screen at the end of the day. This cannot be part of the solution in that way, or part of the thing that we need to get well in the end of the day. I think for all viewers out there and any patient or client experience who know that you can't take my cell phone, it's not about taking your cell phone. I'm confident that if you put this thing down for 30 days and work on yourself, you will see the value of putting this thing down for that time period, and just encouraging you, the viewers, to take that seriously for your mental well-being.
Yeah, in the 15 years that I've been doing this, there hasn't been a single person that's relinquished their cell phone for 30 or 45 treatments a day that when they got it back didn't say they were grateful for that opportunity. Not a single person.
Yeah.
So it is, again, we're back to the arrow.
Yep.
Pull it back to launch over a potential spot we've ever been. So really appreciate that. I want to end with, we're coming up on, we've talked about how we can continue to inform the industry through quality of care. We've talked about some changes we would make. We've talked about some changes that have happened, some new rules and regulations. Peaks Recovery is rolling into a very special anniversary, our 10-year anniversary. And I remember when we opened Peaks Recovery in 2014. Something that was really important to me. I wasn't right-sized at the time, but I was like, man, somehow, some way, someday, my brothers are going to be out here and we're going to be rocking this thing. And so here we are 10 years removed from that day. We got Dylan, who's over in IT. We got you in the executive director role. And to be very clear and frank with the viewers, you and I are very relational for the first time in a long time, and it feels really good. It feels like we have a phenomenal and integrous opportunity to move the company in a direction that we've never been. And I'm really, really grateful about that opportunity. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the gratitudes you have. I mean, 10 years is a long time. To your point, and certainly a point that I've connected with, we've been able to build somewhat of a resilient company. We've gone through a shit ton of stuff, a bunch of curveballs in the last 2 years that would have otherwise sunk a normal small mom and pop business. And so as we roll into this 10-year, the anniversary is in September, we're as connected as ever. Dylan's on site, our ownership group is coming together. What are some of the stuff that you're excited about in this anniversary season?
Yeah, thank you for that. Maybe as a joke, maybe it's not a joke, maybe it's not funny, but it feels like we're on our 9th life. Like we've put a lot of, I think one of the gifts of entrepreneurship, it comes with a lot of fear in the beginning of it. We don't have the spirituality coming into this, no doubt. I don't even know what a PHP was when I started here, at Peaks at the end of the day. One of the gifts of being an entrepreneur is you get real-time life lessons along the way. As a professional, not just in behavioral health care, but a person who's come to recognize the values in running a business and something like behavioral health is there are clinicians and doctors who come in with all of this intrinsic motivation to treat the patient that's in front of them. And I got a big heart and love for the patients I walk by, high-fiving every day at Peaks Recovery Centers. But what this time frame has given me is the gift of what my values are in operating a business at the end of the day. And I see, especially in that step back period, leadership, strategy, crunching numbers. That's my value system. That's what I love. What can I do with those skill sets and values? I can take care of teams and operations and systems and allow them to be the best versions of themselves in the delivery of that care, and have learned to give them not give them in the sense of like, a mom and dad, kind of atmosphere, but allow them the opportunity to get into work and do what they do best and what they went to school for and what they are trained to do and where their hearts and passions are at, because mine is in managing all the systems, right? So for all the great love I've had, one of the trade-offs and gifts that's been given to me is I used to just carry this huge weight about what's going on in patient care, AMAs, all that type of stuff, but that's not really my weight within the operations. And so the gift has been to learn things in real time, to be able to know what my values are, as a leader, as a professional in an organization. And what I mean for the viewers out there as well too is that I hear a lot of, whether it's our patient demographic or individuals and friends that I encounter, they're like, I want to be a physical therapist. I want to be this over here. And I think we point a lot at the job, and we could do better as a world about pointing at the values. Because when you know your values, whether it's Peaks Recovery Centers for me, or a hospital system, or a tech company, or whatever, I can work in any industry now. Or at least that's the way I see myself within this world. And it feels like such a relief because it's not limiting, in that regard. So showing back up to Peaks, like the gift is like I'm wholly excited to be here because I know what that value is, and I can apply these values and skill sets here to the benefit of other individuals within these programs. So, again, just kind of recapitulate, entrepreneurship gives you a lot of life lessons. It kicks your ass in real time in a way that, even pursuing my MBA program here in the near future, I know I'm not going to get a lot of that out of the program. I've already received the gifts of, leadership and those benefits, but at the same time, giving that value construct as well too. And then I think, from a brotherhood standpoint as well too, how many people, even in interviews outside of Peaks that I've stepped into, it's like, I would have killed my brother too. It's like we have killed each other, a lot. And Dylan coming into the organization as well too, like he's fought us as the younger brother as he naturally would. And then we turn to him and say, dude, we've been doing this for a decade. You've only been doing this for us for a couple of years. So like, we appreciate the intensity, but we know how to throw blows in a different sort of way. And to survive a process in which we recognize to the viewers out there from like a mental health standpoint, we were prepared to start it from a mental health standpoint, but we were not prepared to drive it to where it was at. And it took the teachings and lessons from fellow staff, clinical care, the psychedelic movement, a variety of different things to get us right-sized and centered to be the professional that we are in this moment and to be the rock, I think finally, in the wave of crashing water in that regard. So that would be my whole capitulation of what these gifts have been like.
Yeah, I think it's really well stated, and thank you. It's moving into this 10th year. I've really seen a dynamic approach from you that I hadn't seen before, specifically to what you just noted is you've taken this time to kind of zoom out, and now you're passionately putting people in positions that they're passionate about and getting the best out of them. And I think that's what great leaders do is they look at systems, they identify, to your point, what's your value here? And you put them in front of something that's really valuable for them so that they too, just like us as entrepreneurs and being business owners, they can drive with a tremendous amount of fortitude and passion into that process, which I think is absolutely huge, man. It's been just an incredible joy to have you back in the organization over the last 5 weeks. Even more grateful to have you on the show today, to be connected. And I want to remind the viewers of one thing that we started with, that we continue, regardless of what the industry, payer sources do, we continue to run on this constant thread from a cultural perspective that says nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. And that is something that will always live in value at Peaks 24 hours at a time.
Yeah, and to not steal the hook, but just to re-invite it in, that may be the fundamental aspect of what quality means in our industry, at least for a time period, is caring. Caring fundamentally matters because caring is that ability to build that rapport with the individual with the hope of exchanging that relational aspect into a future that is guided by a recovery journey. And so in the interim period, it's not, even though we point at pains of recovery centers and behavioral health programs and challenges that they face and cell phones and these types of things that we're scrambling at the end of the day, I have no doubt in most of the programs that I've worked in, there is a team that is operating that cares, and that cares for your loved one to be well in that regard, and that's certainly the principle and priority at Peaks Recovery.
Yeah, really appreciate it, man. So grateful to have you back. Until next time, peace.